All right. So, everybody, we're going to get started. My name's Melissa Dark, and I'm a professor here at Purdue University. Jerry asked me if I would do a fireside chat. And so when I envisioned this, I envisioned Diana and Tim and Neal and I sitting down here amongst you, and we would be fireside chatting with you. But I'm told that's not possible. I asked yesterday. But for videotaping purposes, that can't be done. So I'm going to start, I'm going to ad-lib here real quick. Thought, what can I do? I'm going to start with a few questions. Set the tone about fireside chats, okay? So who gave the first fireside chat? FDR gave the first fireside chat. That's correct. When was the first fireside chat delivered? The day after a tornado warning? No, I looked. I thought, wouldn't that be so ironic if there was a tornado warning in the United States? I checked only in the United States, Dickie. So when was it? It was 1933, and there was a tornado warning on March 14th, 1933 in Nashville, Tennessee. Closest one, okay? And this one is Reagan's first State of the Union address. Since I had Reagan on the last slide, I thought I'd carry that through. So there were a total of 30 fireside chats. And this question is asking you, what was the theme of the first and the last? Number 1 and number 30. The bank crisis and the fifth war loan drive. That's correct. So, but the focus of our fireside chat here is D. Okay? The cybersecurity labor market and demand and supply. And this is a bonus question that has a prize with it. And the question is not up here. What is the average length of a fireside chat? I'll take the first 5 answers, closest person. 30 minutes, who said it? Okay, any other answers? 20, 26.
45.
45. Going, 35, was 29 and a half minutes. 29 and a half minutes to Don Ray. It's good to see you. And I say that because I have a dissertation defense today at noon. I'm the major professor for a young man who's going to defend his dissertation today, so I thought that was another important aspect. So I'm really thrilled to be joined by 3 of my colleagues. Tim, I'm only meeting in person for the first time today. Diana Burley. So Diana is currently Associate Dean for Research and External Relations at the George Washington School of Human Resources?
Education and Human Development.
Education and Human Development. I've known Diana for a long time, and she's got a wealth of experience, I think, looking at what has changed in about 20 years in the supply chain of supplying cybersecurity professionals. Neal Ziering, Lead Technical Director at the National Security Agency. I've been there 29 years, if I remember correctly, and all 29 years in government service. So I asked Neal to talk to us a little bit about what he has observed in labor demand changing over that period of time. And Tim Sewell, currently at Eli Lilly, formerly at Mayo Clinic, and I forgot the other place.
Lockheed Martin.
Lockheed Martin. So we've got, from the demand side, some interesting perspectives, both from the government and from the private sector. So before I open up with my first question, you all see the same statistics that I see. 1.8 million people needed in the global cybersecurity workforce by 2022. And sometimes you put those numbers up and they're shocking, maybe even almost paralyzing. You know, what do we do? What do we do? And having been involved with the CERIAS program here in cybersecurity education at Purdue for a long time, for almost 20 years, we are still only producing a trickle, you know? So sometimes I think it's just a matter of more. And then I say, no, it isn't. It's a matter of more of the right thing, you know? So I want to open with, what are your perspectives on, and I'll start with Neal and then go to Tim. What are your perspectives on more of the right thing?
Okay, I don't know if, is this mic on? Yeah. So I think it's partly a matter of more, but it's not exactly the same mix of people that we wished to hire, that were sort of wanting to pull into the cybersecurity profession than it would have been, say, 5 or 10 years ago, right? I think, at least in my perception, watching that from the government side, there was a lot more emphasis on what I might flippantly call boxes and processes. You know, hiring people who could build boxes for us and hiring people who would run what we might think of as security compliance processes, you know, your accreditors and testers. Not that those people aren't needed. We still need people to do that, although the experience we're asking them is a little different. But we need a lot more folks in the areas of things like threat analysis, application security design and characterization, and people at what I might characterize as the intersection of cybersecurity policy and law. That's sort of a growth area in my perception. So, and I have other notes of things I'll work in later.
Okay.
Tim, let's go to you.
Yeah,
Initial reactions.
So I would agree with you, Neal. I think it's a question of more of what. And I think there's, especially in kind of post-primary education, there's an emphasis on some really technical skills, which are important. But if you can't speak in the language of business, then you're less useful in a corporate setting, at least. Security is a boardroom conversation now. We have that conversation with our board of directors at every quarterly meeting. We have it with our executive committee on a regular basis. And if all you can do is speak about security in terms of math and firewalls, and you can't tie that back to the risk to the business, those critical operational processes, then you're less useful to the corporate side of the equation. So I think there's got to be that blend between the hard technical skills and then that business acumen.
So I'm going to turn it to Diana now, and I'm going to say, okay, if it's more and more of certain things, what's your perspective on the United States currently has about 260 schools recognized as centers of academic excellence in cybersecurity. Research institutions, 4-year schools, 2-year schools. You know, how is our system marshaling its resources to be responsive? How can it be more agile? Where do we get stuck?
So we have about 260 CAEs, but we have 4,500 institutions of higher education in the United States. So we still have a long ways to go, even if we just look at that balance, because the reality is that it's not just CAEs that we're looking to develop the cybersecurity workforce. So we have a long way to go. Even when we look inside the CAEs and we look inside the institutions that are developing students, they're primarily based in computer science, computer engineering, IT, places where curricula is very heavily focused on the computing aspects of the challenge, but also where the curriculum is so full that it's difficult to add in some of these other elements that we need, where we've heard business policy, law, business acumen, communications, and all of that. And so we really have to think a bit more broadly and holistically about how to implement and develop programs that will allow us to strike the right balance. And we've been working on some initiatives to help us to do that. But we really have to think a bit more broadly about how to effectively balance the development of technical skills and also the development of the business acumen and the communication skills that will allow our cybersecurity professionals to be able to function within their organizations.
Okay, so I want to stop for just a minute because I'm supposed to be doing a fireside chat and not a panel. And I want to go ahead
by the fire, right?
and invite some of you to, yes, please. I am inviting you to make comments,
for it.
yes.
Can you hear me? Yeah, I'm Fred Scholl, consultant, and thank you very much. Nashville, I totally agree with everything I heard on the panel. I'm very excited that I think you guys are getting the story right. I've done work in academia and business, and I take exception with the number about, we need 1 million new cybersecurity professionals or something like that. I did drill down and contacted people in government about that, and the number really refers to jobs that have some component of cybersecurity acumen needed to do the job, which I'd kind of agree with. But I think that we really have to get this idea across that, let's say you look at a typical large company. How many people are involved in cybersecurity? There's like 0.2% or something like that. So let's say we increase it to 0.25%. Is that going to have any effect? No. I think we need to develop more programs to train the other people in the company and not just do the boring annual awareness training. And several of the speakers here have talked about that. So my question is there any hope for getting the concepts of cybersecurity into the boardroom, into the senior management, so that when there's this dialogue between the 0.2% and the rest of the people, progress can be made more effectively?
Okay, great question. Initial responses?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Absolutely. In fact, the program that you all were talking about earlier, where we're spreading across at Purdue, even looking across different schools, is a testament to that. But I would take issue with the 0.2%. In my mind, everyone is doing some cybersecurity related work in the organization, and it's just a question of what role are they playing and how are they participating in the process. Because when we look at it that way, it is a more effective way of convincing academic institutions that we need to spread cybersecurity across the curriculum and enable those institutions to target and position the pieces of content where they need to, but to make the argument that everyone has some role to play and that we just have to figure out how to effectively to teach it.
Neal.
I'm going to try to add something to that from a specifically sort of government or intelligence defense viewpoint. And that is that we hire a lot of folks who aren't, primarily cybersecurity, intelligence analysts, financial analysts, people like that. But because cyberspace is so deeply integrated in our businesses and societies and missions these days, all of those folks need to have some cyber knowledge, cybersecurity or defensive knowledge as part of their education, right? If I come to Purdue to hire a person whose expertise is in Middle Eastern area studies, I would like them to have a little leavening of cyber knowledge in there, because that's the way the world's working these days. So there's both growth in the person who is a cybersecurity professional first and foremost, whole variety of capacities, and in many, many other specialties across our businesses and agencies, just like Fred was saying there. I think that's a puzzle for educators, how to work that in curricula that are already pretty full.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to pick up on that in just a minute, but I wanted to see first, Tim, if you had a comment, and then I know we've got another gentleman here.
Yeah, I would say, like I mentioned, our board does get it, and maybe we're lucky, maybe we're unlucky, because they really do seem to get it. I trace it back to the Target breach, right, where you had a lot of senior executives lose their jobs that had nothing to do with cybersecurity. At that moment, it became everybody's responsibility, from the company president to the guy in the mailroom who's still got an email account and gets those same phishing messages that everybody else in the company receives. I would love to see more cyber curriculum baked into every academic discipline, much the same way you see computer skills built into every discipline today. I mean, you can't go study mineral sciences without a computer degree or a computing class, so why not the security piece of that same tool that you're going to use no matter what discipline that you're pursuing?
Okay, thanks. Let me turn to you.
Hello, I'm Brett Miller from the University of Michigan. I'm a Purdue engineer grad though, so hopefully I'm among friends. My question is, do you think that there are any lessons in the way that you meet a labor shortage in a technologically changing environment, such as, say, the Industrial Revolution?
Good question. Good question. How you address a labor shortage in a period of revolution. Did it, fair summary?
Very carefully. I do think that there are similarities, and you know, this is something that a colleague of mine out at the University of Washington and I have struggled with, because I think that if we just look at the way that higher education is structured, and we use that as a mechanism for understanding the shift in the way that the labor market works, the current way that higher ed is structured really isn't serving us well in a field like cybersecurity. Because inherently in our structure are these silos that we have spent a great deal of time constructing intentionally, purposefully, because we felt that it was the right way to get the depth of knowledge that we needed in engineering or computer science or English or whatever it is. And the reality is that this field, that siloed structure, is actually hindering our ability to do the kinds of content across the curriculum, problem-based education that we really need to be more efficient in the way that we educate our cybersecurity professionals. So in some ways, there's a mismatch in the current state of the labor market, the current state of the field, and the current state of the structure of higher ed that we need in order to get our people into that labor system.
I'm going to take a slightly different angle. I think that the person asking the question is right. We have to have, I think, a diversity of sources to build up a labor force to support this sort of cyber revolution that we're living in. Higher education and sort of the traditional academic pipeline of getting a bachelor's and getting a master's, it is one of those sources, far from the only one. A huge one for us, for example, at NSA, we call military conversions. People who serve time in uniform and then after separation or retirement from the military, yeah, you did that, come in back as civilians, but they bring different experience, different viewpoints, different training with them. That's an important source. And there are many others, but I'll stop talking about them now because Dickie is looking impatient over there.
Yeah, because I think you're missing the point of the answer to that. I think the point is that if you look at all of the cyber that we do, people are the long pole in everything. They're slow at it, blah, blah, blah. So automation and artificial intelligence are going to take a lot of those jobs that we need these people to do. And we can save the people for the things that where you really need the innovative attempt at doing things. So as soon as we get smart enough to figure out the rules of what automation can do, that's going to save you some of those people. And so, yeah, you can parlay this. The other thing I think we need to talk about is when you're talking about we need 1 million people, they aren't all of one size. And you've really got to look at the roles they're going to play and who's going to provide the training for what roles.
So I'm going to pick a little bit on the automation comment, because if we automate the wrong thing, we just do the wrong things faster. I think until we start understanding more about our threats and our adversaries, and ultimately we as a field start to look more like our threats and adversaries, and that's back to the basic diversity. Going back a little bit to how do you address any resource shortage, you look for alternative supplies. I think we've got a whole population that's missing. I'll just kind of stereotype the room. It's about, let's say, 9-to-1 ratio of men to women. I think we've excluded half the population from helping us solve this problem. And I think that's a challenge that we have to address far earlier in the cycle than college. This is a grade school problem. I mean, my daughter's in 2nd grade, and she already is getting challenged by the boys in her class because she likes math. And that's just it's crazy to me. She's in 2nd grade. So I think there's some systemic challenges we have if we really want to start looking at how we address the resource and the pipeline challenge in cyber.
Yeah. Fair.
Anybody who's got the answer to that one, I'm going to ask you to come up, and I'm going to let you have the mic right in front of this young lady. All right.
So what's happened is that women have taken a lot of the jobs that men used to fill in the medical field. And so we've had that shift. All of my doctors are women now. When I was your age, all my doctors were men. And so we've had that shift all over the place, and that's what's happening. So, yeah.
Okay, so maybe not the answer, but hope. Hope. Time is the
Follow
answer.
that model.
Yeah. Okay. Yes, you may. No.
All right. If I could comment, I think we have a marketing problem. We don't have a technology problem. When I talk a lot about women in STEM, I've been an electrical engineer in the industry for 20 years. When I ask my colleagues what I should talk about cybersecurity, they say talk about how great the technology, like how cool the technology is and relate it to gaming. Neither of those things is interesting to me. It's intellectually interesting, but I care about technology for what it does to help humanity, to solve problems. If you look at where the women go in engineering, it's environmental and it's biomedical, because you see a direct connection to how you help people. To the medical comment, you are helping people. Cybersecurity protects people. But we have hackathons and we talk about how much we can break stuff and how many points we can earn being competitive about breaking in. And we don't talk about how understanding how to break in helps me protect people so that they don't get hurt. And if we can position to women how creativity and ingenuity and collaboration is part of cybersecurity, you will have an entirely different experience with your audience.
So
Good one.
thank
yeah.
you. So, her comment made me remember that Robert Frost was the first poet laureate in the United States. And he said, unless you are educated in metaphor, you are not fit to be let loose in the world. So maybe we need to think about our metaphors, what we communicate to people about what cybersecurity is. Yeah. You've been waiting patiently. Thank you.
I actually had a comment about something Diana had said, but
Okay.
it took me a minute to build up courage to walk up here. You had said that the computer science curriculums were really full, and I just want to say that I agree with this. Like, there are so many other courses outside of computer science that I'd like to take to tie into it, and just if there would be a way to like find more room to have more other stuff in it, like I would be all for it. So I just wanted to say that.
I think we should stop there because this is a hard problem.
It is a hard problem.
So let's talk about this a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I have these conversations with my industry and government friends, I remind them that it's not a simple matter of a faculty member making a decision that we should include content and therefore let it be. That there is a structure, there are accreditation bodies and accreditation requirements that have to be in programs that say what courses and content needs to be in programs, and so it's very difficult to get outside of that. One of the things that we are doing collectively, the big we, is we are now in the period of a trial accreditation process that ABET, which is the body that accredits the schools of colleges of engineering, in cyber sciences. The idea being that there can be this other degree program that will allow for the flexibility to include the kind of content that we need in computing, but also in cybersecurity programs. And so that accreditation process is based on a project that I've spent the last couple of years working on, which is to develop the first set of global cybersecurity curricular guidelines on behalf of the ACM and the IEEE. And so what we tried to do was to outline a framework that would provide both the depth of content, but also the flexibility within the curriculum to allow for institutions to be able to address those issues. So your point, your comment, wherever you went, is well taken. There you are.
SPAF just asked permission from this gentleman to cut in line, and I think it was granted. Checking? Yes, okay.
He knows what happens if he says no. So I wanted to just add to this, as someone who has for years tried to get my colleagues here to have something about security, privacy, those issues into the curriculum for all students to have. And it's still a matter of electives at the undergraduate level, because we are also driven by demand.
Yep.
And although we here know the demand for people who are trained in this area, what is the department focusing on right now? Well, it's big data. Yep. It's data analysis, data science. And huge push there. There's a new program. They just established a new university center. That is one of the two areas, along with AI, that is the majority area all of our incoming students want to take. And in large part, it's because the companies that are corporate partners that are hiring our students, that's what they want. It's whatever the latest buzzword is. It's not a matter of saying everybody should have cybersecurity. If every one of our corporate partners were to say to the faculty, there must be a course in data security, in computing security, network security, whatever you want to call it, for not only every CS student, but everybody on campus. If all the companies came back and started saying that, then maybe we would have something. I have tried repeatedly to get courses or even a major started in this area and been shot down because I've been told there isn't money in it, there isn't enough demand. And so that is a collective problem that we also are going to have to address, is understanding the priorities. If the focus is on the new hot items to make money and startups and to be competitive rather than in pure, this is the whole problem with security, right? What is its role? Then we aren't going to have the advances at the university. So if you want to expand on that, feel free. But that's from in the trenches. That's been the experience here.
Amen. We're doing the same thing, SPAF. We at GW we are launching a big data science institute, and it's moving. Yep. And so it's the new sexy term, whatever it is. But we have to work with, and I tell our industry partners all the time, our industry and government partners, those of you who are hiring, we need you to speak to the provosts and the presidents and the folks at the academic institutions that are making the decisions about what happens with curricula, because they won't listen to us. They expect us to advocate for our fields. So we need you to come and say, this is who we want to hire.
I had two thoughts, which was to ask everybody here, if you have the opportunity to lean into this conversation, lean in, because we do need you. Okay, but then my second thought was, maybe we don't need 260 universities doing cybersecurity education partly. Maybe we don't even need 1,000. Let's say we could, triple that number. We could get 1,000 of the 4,500. Yeah. Maybe we don't need 1,000 doing it partly. Maybe we need a small number. Maybe we need a National Cybersecurity Academy. Maybe we need something that is concentrated and immersive and deep and selective.
I think you need both.
And maybe we need both.
Yeah. I mean, you need depth, and that's part of what the CAERs are about, right? Institutions that can take someone all the way to a PhD level in their education. But as several of the speakers have pointed out, you need folks who have, their specialty might be, business management, but they have some cybersecurity. And data science is sort of the hot buzzword right now. We're hiring people in that. Almost every organization I'm in, we'd expect the data scientist to have had at least some exposure at a college level to security before they come into NSA to be a data scientist. And I think there are a lot of corporations where that would be true as well. Certainly a lot of our big industry partners. They just expect that. It's become so important that you don't even say it anymore. You just look for it.
You've got to continue saying it.
Yeah. So you're right, we do. And thank you for reminding us of that, and we'll try to do better at it. Okay, Tim?
Yeah, I would say, when we hire a research chemist, we assume that their curriculum included a course on ethics and how to use that knowledge well and how not to create chemical weapons in a laboratory environment. That has not proven to be the case in technology fields. We are lacking that, what I think we see from a business perspective as a basic assumption that we teach people how not to do evil in this field it seems to be missing in computer science and other technology disciplines. So I don't know where that gap is, and I will continue to trumpet at my organizations about the need for, we need dedicated security at the collegiate level, but I do think there's an ownership of that issue that's larger than a single organization.
Thank you. I want to get back to you. You've been waiting patiently.
So we've drifted a little bit, but I'm finding it increasingly unhelpful to talk about a strategic workforce problem monolithically. One reason is we don't want necessarily, to key off Dickie's point, we don't want more cyber folks, we want better cyber folks. And one of the responses to getting the strategic workforce problem for Cyber Command or for cyber warriors, who we took a bunch of 2-year associate's degrees, gave them a CISSP crash course and called them cyber warriors, but really they're cyber grunts or infantry. And we do need a bunch of grunts, but we also need a bunch of generals. And we do need a bunch of blue-collar cyber jobs, and we need a bunch of white-collar cyber jobs. But moreover, I think even since I have kids as well, I think we need a cyber literacy baseline, just like we need civics. Like, as we increasingly depend upon technology, this has to be woven into some form of baseline literacy, cyber literacy, which isn't job specialization or even graduate or collegiate level. But moreover, we want, on top of that, that every major has the fit-for-purpose subset of the cyber spectrum woven into them. So if they are an executive, if they are an entrepreneur, if they're a developer, what's that subset of that spectrum of cybersecurity that would make them good receivers of people? So I might major in cybersecurity as a career, but all my developers I interact with should minor in cyber secure development, resilience, ruggedness, et cetera. So one of the questions after this monologue is, how do we that want to see better inclusion, want to see earlier inclusion, how do we talk differently so it's not this monolithic, fuzzy thing that doesn't go anywhere? Because what I'm most concerned about lately is the strategic workforce problem in medical to get qualified security people into hospitals in rural areas is directly competing with Cyber Command or directly competing with financial services. So we don't even just have a single pipeline problem. We have to decide as a nation, where do we want to place the emphasis, the scholarship programs, the loan forgiveness, such that we are pushing folks toward the areas we strategically need most help, not just the one who's loudest or has the most taxpayer funding.
So there were a number of issues that you raised in your monologue. So I'll address and they were all great points. I'll address just a couple of them. One, I think in terms of thinking about the general literacy and trying to push down, one of the things that we have to reconcile is the way that we talk about this. We often move into we need to get more people in the cybersecurity workforce. Well, immediately that turns off a whole segment of the population that says, I don't want to be a cybersecurity professional. So we have to use language that is more inclusive and treats this as a general literacy issue. I know that when my kids graduated out of their high schools at Fairfax County in Virginia, one of the things that they had to take in order, it was a graduation requirement, was they had to take business and personal finance. 0 credits, no grade, pass, fail, but every single student that graduates from that high school system must pass a basic course in business and personal finance. Not because everybody's going to be a financial analyst, but because in order to survive in society, you need to know how to manage your money, right? They all took a field trip to Business Finance Park or whatever it was called, Junior Achievement Finance Park. We need to do things like that on the literacy side for cybersecurity so that everyone can function in a digitally enabled society. And so that's separate. That's a completely separate conversation than preparing people to go into the workforce. On the workforce side, the only point that I'll reference, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues, is when we start to discuss these issues or when we hear about these issues being discussed on the Hill and where the money is going, part of the reason why there's such an emphasis, and I can say this because I don't work for the government, I work for a university. So one of the reasons why there's so much emphasis on the grunts or the blue-collar workforce is because it is very popular to send money to community colleges because every congressional district in the nation has a community college system. So everyone gets money. And it's less about the specific needs of the workforce than it is about the political needs of the members, and that's the reality. So we have to figure out how to work around those issues or to leverage that to move us to where we need to be, but we can't lose sight of the fact that there are multiple things happening in the name of preparing the cybersecurity workforce.
Yeah, I want to hit a different point that I really liked in your comments. If we want cybersecurity to be sort of the part of the knowledge base of people in different specialties, your business guy, your intelligence analyst, your lawyer, etc., then you're right. We need a tailored sort of, I don't know if you call it an addition or element of the educational experience for those folks, and it can't be the same, right? That the knowledge needed by an attorney is not the same as the knowledge needed by a communications specialist. And I think that it's going to be incumbent on this community, the cybersecurity community, to work with these other fields, especially the ones that are willing, I hope, and then for in a sense, the job market, government, industry, to come back and say, well, this is what I expect of my communications professional, of my budget and finance person, et cetera, et cetera. That's going to be a big job, but I think if we really want that vision of a sort of cyber-savvy workforce to be realized, we're going to have to do that. And this community is the hub, I think, of that.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's never fun to talk about sticks. It's always more fun to talk about carrots. But if you look at least in the white-collar environment today, if you interview for a job and you can't operate PowerPoint, you are at a strong disadvantage for achieving that job. And I think we're going to start moving these basic cyber behaviors in the same way. If you can't identify a phishing email, or if you can't identify a potentially malicious link, you're going to start to be disadvantaged in hiring and in promotion conversations, because we are starting to just expect those behaviors out of our workforce.
Interesting. I will turn it over to you, sir.
All right, I'm Ryan Okins, a security architect at Eli Lilly. And one of the big debates that you hear across information security are, where does your CISO kind of line up? Do you fall under IT? Do you fall under risk? Do you fall under legal? Is that the same identity crisis that we have with higher education, on where does the information security program fall, whether it's in computer science, or would we benefit more by either, I think, Neal, you were starting to hit on this, of putting more curriculum within business or within an English major? Let's teach them technical writing capabilities. You would highly increase the job opportunities, I think, to just get some level of cybersecurity formalized training on their resumes as they're leaving higher education. Are there any efforts underway to do that? And also, I think there would be a lot of commercial and private company partners that would be willing to help with curriculum in those various areas to support educational courses to do that.
I'll be very quick, because I know you wanted to comment on your colleagues' thing. My strong belief is that the U.S. educational system is big enough that we need a variety, right? And I look at a lot of CAE applications, CAER applications, and they do have a variety today, but it's not sufficient yet, right? You should have some cybersecurity programs that their center of gravity is more towards the School of Business, or towards the School of Engineering or Computer Science, or perhaps, I don't think we've seen these yet, but maybe in the law school. We need that variety, and that's going to be a long project to get
it. You don't have to. Don't feel compelled.
Yeah, I'm not compelled.
I know Neal deferred to you.
I've got an easy answer for this one. I
Okay.
think that interdisciplinary programs like CERIAS play a key role in that, because that's where you can easily create that intersection of fields. My boss, our CISO, Ryan and my CISO, she likes to talk about innovation occurring at the intersection of fields. And in cyber in particular, it's critical. So sort of the easier example these days is back to phishing. psychology majors have a lot to contribute to this field of study. But a program in computer science and cybersecurity is not going to attract a lot of psychology majors. So these kinds of interdisciplinary approaches are, in my opinion, the key to achieving some of those objectives.
Again, I will say, we folks at universities, we need you, because there was a time when interdisciplinary education was popular and encouraged at Purdue University. And I don't feel I'm living in that era anymore. I feel that I am living in an era that very much rewards disciplines to colleges. The budget model thwarts doing things across colleges and across fields. So we need your voice.
And just to add to that, because I don't think I know Purdue's not alone in that. What has happened is, because interdisciplinary is still a very nice word that colleges like, but what I think has happened is there are disciplines with a course somewhere else, and we're labeling that as interdisciplinary so that we can get the best of both worlds. And that's not what you mean, that's not what you need, that's not what the field needs, but we need you to come and help us make those arguments.
Help us help you, yeah. Go ahead, sir.
Jim Basatka, recently retired Director of Aviation Security for the Boeing Commercial Airplane Company. When I listen to this conversation, what I hear is a conversation about how to sell what we have today. And I think maybe we should look at the conversation about how do we change the environment. And I'll give you an example. Back in the 90s, the Boeing company realized that if we did not improve the accident rate, that within 20 to 25 years, we would have a fatal accident a day in the aviation system. And when you look at the cause of accidents, it was perfectly good pilots flying perfectly good airplanes into the ground and killing people. And when you dug into what was the root cause, it was because of the decision-making environment in the cockpit. Now, the aviation industry, the first thing that had to happen is you had to get key stakeholders who could change it. It's the airlines, the manufacturers, and the regulator. Get them to agree that we had a problem that had to be fixed, and then come together and be very open to understand how do we change the environment so that we could eliminate the accidents. And when's the last time you read about an accident in aviation? Because they changed the process, the decision-making environment. I think maybe the conversation needs to change. How do we change the environment in our country so that instead of having to opt into a 401k, we have to opt out, because people are less likely to opt out than they are to opt in. Are there lessons here that we can learn that we can then use to change the tide and the direction of things instead of having corporations having to opt in? So I'd be interested in your thoughts.
We'll do next year's CERIAS Symposium, SPAF, down in Washington, D.C. We'll give senators and representatives and staffers an opportunity to come in and talk with us, Fireside Chat.
You won't be able to determine. We'll all be talking over each other. Just one quick comment on that, because I want to try to tie it back to workforce. If we're going to change the cyber environment, and there are many ways that we could do that, I think it's going to be the research community has to help lead the way on that, right? I don't think you're going to get it out of the folks in the trenches, because in my experience, they're so busy fighting fires that it's very difficult for them to kind of look up and see a long-term vision for a different sort of cyber environment. I think that's got to start here in the research community, and then try to drive it through partnerships and allies out into the sort of broader community.
Thank you. Okay, this is going to be the last question or comment.
Wow. Thank you, Melissa. Just kind of want to, and thank you for that. I think the leaning forward comment that you made about staying engaged in the dialogue. Dickie, your comment about why do we have female doctors now more than we have male doctors. And I think the comment that was made by the young lady about how do we articulate cyber profession in the words that are understood by a greater diversity is very important. We had an 11th grader keynote the NICE K through 12 conference. An 11th grader who started his own corporation, his LLC. Now, you know, let's his dad's a cybersecurity professional, et cetera, so he has the pedigree, right? But his complaint and why he started his LLC is because kids in the 5th, 6th, and 7th grade don't know what a cybersecurity professional is. And there's no one aching to be a cybersecurity professional. The comment was, oh, I don't even want to do that. Well, we don't know what that means. So I think we need to lean forward at the lower level in the K through 12 space and lean forward in the things that we've talked about of how do we change. I like the comment that was made about the Industrial Revolution. How do we strategically start thinking? We've been tactically thinking for way too long. How do we take the energy, and it is energy, to set aside the time to continue a strategic dialogue in parallel with the tactical problem we have to solve? We can't abandon that. But how do we do in parallel a strategic national conversation that changes the paradigm? All of us have these stories. My 8-year-old granddaughter doesn't know anything but an iPad and an iPhone and those technologies. But have we taught them to be a good cyber citizen? I would say no. When I was a little kid living on 9th Street Hill, Mom and Dad said, you don't go next door and go into somebody's refrigerator and get something to drink. Okay, that's being a good citizen. We haven't taught that in the cyber world. And I think we need to think about strategically how to do that and make it so that when we give that 8-year-old a device, they know that there's nothing sacred on Facebook and that you can't believe that stuff anymore. You got to do your own fact checking on information. So I agree that we need to lean forward. We need to keep the dialogue going. Phenomenal dialogue in all these panels, phenomenal stuff. Thank you, CERIAS, for holding this. I think we just need to figure out a way to continue the dialogue throughout the industry. Thank you.
Thanks. Raise it up. Okay, Tim, last ask, last thoughts.
I'm really intrigued, Mark, by your thought. I think that's a strategic change, not just in cyber, but that's really a change in how society functions. You know, we have tried to take many of our physical world processes, and speaking in the business environment, the easiest thing to do with technology is to accelerate what I do today. Mm-hmm. But I don't actually get the benefits of transformative technology unless I change what I do today to achieve the same or better outcome. And I think it's an interesting way to think about cybersecurity. How do we change the conversation from what are we doing to how do we achieve that better outcome?
Good, thanks. Neal, last ask, last thought.
Oh, yeah, so many good topics in this conversation. I think I want to go back to something that someone said earlier about automation. I think that is going to have some effect on the workforce. Many companies, as recently as 6 or 7 years ago, actually used to hire people to go apply patches. Right? And now, who do that, right? So automated systems apply the patches, and human beings go troubleshoot the ones that didn't work. I think overall, we're going to start seeing that across both the people who are full cybersecurity professionals, people who just need a bit of cyber savvy. It's how do we enable the technology to make us more powerful, right? It's sort of along the lines of how do we reach that vision for better ways to achieve the desired outcomes. And I think that's going to change the workforce composition that we're looking for in the future. The metaphor I like to use is I want a person who knows how to do X, but is especially good at teaching a machine learning algorithm to do X faster than and more completely than he can. Just a metaphor. You mentioned those earlier. But I think that's going to change what we ask of the students and of the people that we hire.
Thanks, Neal. Diana Burley, last ask, last thoughts.
I would just ask that you remember that we're talking about a whole ecosystem here. We need students to come into the system, but we also need faculty to teach the students when they're in the system. And one of the things that we often forget about when we're having these kinds of conversations is the fact that at the university, at the post-secondary level, we have a very serious problem in terms of faculty members who are able to actually teach and get the students into the workplace. And so as we look for solutions, as you lean in, as Melissa says, and you're leaning in on getting those young kids interested, getting those middle, high school age kids prepared, getting the curriculum developed. Remember that you also have to have some time to emphasize preparing the people who will actually teach these individuals at all levels, because without that, none of these programs will have a chance of making it.
Thank you. I wore my Fireside scarf for you all today. Make sure you recognized that. Last question, how did every Fireside Chat end? The TV turned off, fireworks. Star Spangled Banner. So, thanks for being here. Thanks for participating. Any announcements for lunch? All right, thank you.